I've divided my 14 by 10 inch watercolour block into 4 using my framing tape, which is like masking tape. So I've not stretched the paper at all, even though it looks a bit like that. And the top left hand corner, I'm using masking fluid, which I quite like using, even though it has got its flaws as well. It's quite useful. So I've sketched in the tree pretty much like how it is in the photograph, and used masking fluid to mask out the flowers and some light on the tree. Meanwhile, bottom left hand corner, I've very loosely drawn the tree a little bit more close up now, and I'm actually rubbing onto the rough watercolour paper some wax, and that resists the watercolour, so you'll keep the light on the watercolour paper there. So a candle or an oil pastel are perfect for this technique of resist. This is my drawing pen. It's a Unipin fine liner 0.08 nib, so it's quite fine. It's waterproof and it's black. I'm just sketching in now on rough paper. I would choose for pen and wash, ideally hot press paper. It's perfect for pen and wash, or cold pressed. Rough's a little bit too toothy in a way, but I'm actually painting now wet on dry. Some colours here using yellows, ceruleans and Moonglow by Daniel Smith as well, with my size 6 brush, and just sort of tickling the paint on. With pen and wash, it really is less is more, so don't try to cover all of the light white patches. I will put a little video on my channel next week just of me painting this pen and wash. I thought it might be useful for you guys. I love pen and wash. I don't do enough of it really. I absolutely love it. It's a great way of sketching for a watercolour painting, working out your ideas. And as you can see here, my viewpoint is very much, as you saw that little bit of video, that's the sort of scene. I'm sort of painting that tree and the little forget-me-not flowers further away. So trying out different ideas, see what works for my painting. And I'm using a bit of cerulean now for the sky, just tickling that pen and wash on, wet on dry, just dropping in some darks. Just to say about pen and wash, don't go too dark. Let the pen almost do the shadows for you. Otherwise, the painting will look a little bit flat and laboured. Try to keep the washes really nice and transparent. And a really good piece of advice is, besides less is more, just to only do 2 layers and wait for each layer to dry in between. Really be minimalist in the watercolour. The pen, the drawing is very important as well. So I'm just painting on some dark here on the right hand side of the tree, really sort of exposing that light on the left. Really, that's the thing that really caught my eye, the light on the tree on the right, but also the forget-me-nots. So while that's drying off there, I'm actually drawing with a watercolour pencil, and I'm just sketching away here with a green watercolour pencil. It's extremely loose, and this is a really, really close-up version of the tree, as close as I could get without it distorting it, and it could also look abstract, which would be quite nice as well. I'm using a blue watercolour pencil there as well to draw in some of the forget-me-nots, and now I'm working wet in wet using my size 10 brush. You may notice I've actually written down some of the techniques I'm using. I start to add to those as I go on. I get really kind of into these sketches. It's so much fun. As an artist, I've been painting for years, and I gave myself the opportunity, even though I'm filming and doing a tutorial here, I really found this helpful to me. I don't often give myself the opportunity to paint 4 individual paintings like this and try out all my techniques on just one subject. I usually just do one sketch. So this is great for me. So I'm spattering here, I'm painting wet on wet, using my size 6 brush, and I'm using ultramarine with quinacridone magenta, or you can use opera rose to create that forget-me-nots colour. I'm also sprinkled some sea salt on and use my plastic card to create texture on the trees. I mean, it's all there. I've just gone crazy with this one, but it's thoroughly enjoyable, and this is where the art therapy comes into it. So while that's drying off, I'm painting wet on wet here, top left, and I've mixed up the blue and the pink again for the forget-me-nots, and cerulean and yellow for the greens. And if you missed my tutorial last Sunday, I talk all about mixing spring greens. You might find that helpful. This is quinacridone gold and a little bit of cerulean, and I'm just painting the dark on the right hand side of the tree with my size 4 brush. And now I've used some of the watercolour pencils with an emery board to scrape on the tip of the pencil for it to release some pigment to sort of create texture for the forget-me-not flowers. It's a really nice technique, especially if you don't have Brusho, which is what I'm going to use on the bottom left little painting. I'm also using my watercolour pencil to paint or draw in grasses onto the damp surface as well to create even more texture. And I'm using a dark brown now on the right hand side of this tree. It is damp, so the watercolour pencil, the pigment sort of dissolves quite nicely. It's really fun to do. It really creates texture and darks. So this, I've wet the surface at the bottom left hand painting here, and I'm using cobalt blue and violet for the forget-me-nots. This is Brusho, and I'll have a link in the description below where I've made a video all about Brusho. So I hope those of you that quite like this, check that video out. But I've gone mad with my Brusho using lemon yellow, yellow ochre and black. And it can be a bit wild Brusho. I'm using a spritzer bottle here to get the pigment going even more now, and probably overdid that a little bit. So you've got to be careful how much water you spray. It's quite a small area, so it's quite difficult to control, but so much fun saying all of that. As you saw there, I used my plastic card as well to scrape the Brusho to create texture for that tree. It's a perfect time to dry your painting off now. So my paintings are all dry. I'm using my size 10 brush. And basically, because these are sketches, I'm just building up now darks and details. So the top left here is quite a traditional way of painting. I'm just using a Payne's grey and a little bit of red. And you could use burnt sienna and ultramarine just to paint this really dark shadow colour on the right hand side of the tree. I've just built up some greens there as well. I'm just spattering away to kind of finish off this little painting top left here. There's a little bit of quinacridone gold with some cerulean. For those of you who would like to get access to longer tutorials with lots more in-depth explanations where I go into a lot more detail. So if you are interested, check out the description below, or click the link in the top right hand corner. It will give you more details. As you can see here, I'm spattering some yellow wet on dry with my size 2 brush. And this sort of tutorial now is going to go into a bit of a spattering fest, I'm afraid. But yellow's a really good colour because that Brusho little painting lost a bit of the light. So I'm using yellow, and I'm going to use white gouache and the blue for the forget-me-not colour flowers to get back some more light, or the illusion of light. I'm just brushing off the salt here. It went a little bit mad. Again, it's such a small little painting and I use too much salt really. But I'm just using a darker wash now, painting over the top wet on dry with my size 10 brush just to paint in the shadow of the tree there. I'm just using my plastic card now and just scraping out some of this damp paint. If it runs back too much on itself, it's too wet, so just wait a little bit longer. But I'm also printing with it to create some textures. The salt looks lovely in the background there. I've painted a few foreground grasses in now using the yellow and the cerulean, and now I'm spattering some of the yellow as well, again to create light. And I'm also spattering the ultramarine with the white as well, just to really sort of finish off this little painting. I thought I'd put a little bit more shadow on my tree, the star of my show, on my pen and wash sketch here. And I'm using, you can use a Payne's grey, I'm using Moon Glow here, just wet on dry, and just painting a little bit of a cast shadow as well. It really brings that tree forward. So I'm really sort of composing my pictures here, planning maybe for a larger painting, and just painting some darks in the foreground grasses as well. My painting is dried top left, and I've removed the masking fluid. I'm just spattering now some blue with white, or just blue on its own, wet on dry in the flower area there, and just glazing in very thin washes of green where I sort of got lots of light marks from the masking fluid. Giving this bottom right here another little spatter with ultramarine with a touch of pink and a touch of white there. Well, giving everything a spatter really. I told you it'd be a spatter fest. It's just for me to stop fiddling really and stop overworking my paintings, and just to give a little bit more light, texture and detail. So here is the 4 little sketches with the framing tape removed. I can't believe how different they looked, and I really enjoyed the process. It was quite nice as well, just using the same subject and changing it around, using different techniques. And there was not as much pressure because obviously it's just little sketches, just seeing which techniques work best for this particular subject. So I really hope you've enjoyed this and you've learned something from it. Let me know in the comments section below which one was your favourite. I know which one mine is. I'll put it in the comments section below after I've heard from a few of you. If you have any questions about this tutorial, please put them in the comments section below. I would love to hear from you and I will try and get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you again for watching. Happy painting. Bye for now.